folks, this is Rebekah Lane with Valencia College Embracing the Bold, the show where you get to learn all about the Valencia College faculty, staff, and students that make up our incredible artists and staff. And today, we're not specifically talking to Valencia College employees, although our guest today has worked for Valencia College. It is the holiday and the college is closed, and therefore we are talking to artists within the community to learn a little bit more about what it means to be a working artist in the field in Orlando. And so today I'd like to, we're going to welcome Donald Rupe, the founder of the Renaissance Theater Company. Before I go on, I want to remind you that we do have a creative season that is here at Valencia College, and it will start up again in January. So that's going to start with a photography show that opens on January 18th and will run for at least a month. Then we move on to Four in Motion. That's Friday, January 26th. That is a dance performance that includes 4 individual companies from the Orlando community. One of them is the Valencia College dance program. We'll move on to the Symphonic Band Community Concert. That's going to be February 15th. And then we're moving on to She Kills Monsters. That's Friday, February 16th at 7:30. So once we return for the spring semester, we have a really robust season, as always. But right now, I hope you're enjoying your holiday. And so moving on to our program, today we have Donald Rupe, the founder of the Renaissance Theater Company. So thank you so much for joining us today, Donald. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Doing great. I'm really excited to have you. I love that you've really done a lot of great work in Orlando.
Thank you.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about the Renaissance Theater Company? And then I'm going to ask you a little bit about your background.
Great. So Renaissance Theater Company, or the Ren, we just celebrated 2 years. Our second birthday was just a few weeks ago. But we are a professional theater company dedicated exclusively to new works, and we focus a lot on fair pay for artists, sustainability, and we do a lot of immersive work, a lot of immersive theater where it all happens all around you.
Okay, that's a lot of really interesting things. So first of all, I want to come back to this fair pay, this sustainability, and this immersive. But first, I'd like to know a little bit about how you got here. So, how did you get into theater?
Well, I grew up locally, actually, mostly in St. Cloud, and I was an arts kid pretty much from birth, I think. I started in chorus and then in band as soon as I could pick up an instrument. And I didn't discover theater until high school. And actually, my first major in college was not theater. My first major was saxophone.
Oh
And
my
then
goodness. I played the baritone saxophone in the jazz band
period.
and
I
also
played
the
the
alto.
alto. And then I switched to vocal performance or vocal education or something. I don't know. It was so short-lived. And then I finally found my way to a theater major in my second year of college. Um,
And
but
where did you go to college?
I got my undergrad at FSU and then my master's at NYU.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got into theater, you found it in college.
Well, yeah, I realized I wanted to, stick with it in college. And I think that's because you know, in high school students don't always get like opportunities to direct. And I knew in high school I would never want to be an actor because of my crippling anxiety, but
Oh no.
um, I started directing in my freshman year of college in like the one theater class that I took, and I also would come back home and help the high school that I graduated from prepare for like district thespian festivals. And so I started to direct, and I realized I thought at the time that's what I wanted to do, was be a director, which of course I do and I have done for a long time, but I wouldn't call myself exclusively a director anymore.
So, what would you call yourself?
Um, I've been throwing around theater maker,
Okay.
because I do all kinds of things. My probably the thing I spend the most time on these days is producing theater. Um,
I
and then
understand that.
yeah, probably I'd call myself a writer second, which is not something I ever really anticipated doing, right? Writing shows, especially writing musicals. It just didn't seem like that was going to be the thing. And now that's probably the thing I think I'm probably best at.
Wow. So how did you get from, okay, so you got from acting to directing because you were directing within your acting class. So how did you get from actor to director to writer producer? Like what was that journey?
Well, producing came out of necessity, because no one would hire me
Oh
as a director,
no.
which I find is often the case with, young people who want to direct. No one would hire me. I applied at everywhere in this city, um, to direct for them, and I rarely even got an interview. And so I thought, well, I'll just have to do it myself then. Um, so I started producing, musicals and plays on my own, and then eventually those people started hiring me. Um, then becoming a writer was actually an interesting story. Like so much of my choices come in some sort of spite or like the desire to prove people wrong. And as a director, I would often take pretty strong choices artistically. And there was somebody in town, who has probably heard this story now and probably deeply regrets this moment, but they messaged me on Facebook, and I did not know this person, and they told me they had heard about my bold directing choices, and that I was disrespecting, a certain show that I was working on at the time by quote unquote changing the show, which of course I did not change a word of the script, but I just took a bold choice, and they told me I was, overstepping my role, and that they phrased something like, if I can't just write my own musicals, or I can't like rewrite musicals. And for whatever reason, honestly, in that moment, I thought, in a way, they're kind of right. Like, I do spend, as a director, I would always look at like what I would see as problems with the script and how to fix them, and how easy it would be if I could just rewrite it.
There you go.
And it's like, I'll write my own. So I wrote a musical like shortly after that, and I haven't turned back since.
Wow. So did you have you stopped doing scripted work? Are you primarily directing and producing original work now?
Yeah, these days I haven't done a book show in a long time. We do new plays too, so playwrights submit their scripts, so I'm using scripts, they're just new works, and I can work with the writer during the process and make edits, and so yeah, it's been a long time since I've been stuck to a script.
Wow. So when you so did you go directly from undergrad into grad school?
No, I um I took I think I took 2 years, and I worked at Pottery Barn for a while.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then I got Employee of the Month one month, and out of spite, I quit the next day because I was like, I cannot make this my career.
Oh
So
no.
I started teaching actually, um, and then my master's program, I did it. I don't I, now I'm like trying to remember how I even pulled this off, but I would only go during the summers. So it took me took me 5 summers, I think. But NYU had a program that would allow me to just go up there for a couple of months a year,
Oh, wow.
which
So like a low residency program?
yeah, and it was, you know, for me it was perfect because I had never spent much time in any big cities, and so I got to spend just the right amount of time in New York for me to know that at least at that time in my life, I was not interested in living there. Um,
Fair enough.
yeah, so I kept teaching while getting my master's.
So where were you teaching?
So I taught 1 semester at the School for the Arts in my hometown of Osceola County.
Okay.
Uh, and I had replaced a beloved teacher, which if you've ever, you know about this. Um,
Oh,
the students were just horrendous to me, and the so were the other faculty, honestly.
it's
Um,
hard to replace a beloved teacher and to be the new
yeah,
person.
especially because I was so young.
Yeah.
Um, I
Well,
was
because you
like,
did that right out of undergrad then.
yeah, I was 21.
Oh
Like,
boy.
yeah, and so people did not like what I had to say. So I switched actually, and I ended up teaching at the high school that I graduated from for 7 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Wow. And which high school was that?
Gateway High School
Okay.
in Kissimmee, and I really thought, again, I thought that would be the thing I did forever. I was a very good teacher. I was the teacher of the year, and I almost won a car for the Osceola County Teacher of the Year. And I
Amazing.
at the time I was teaching at Valencia too.
Okay.
Um,
So why did you shift from teaching high school?
well, teaching is very difficult. And I just made certain realizations about myself. And it just wasn't for me. It sounds so silly, but one of the hardest things for me was always being at work at 6:30 in the morning. Um, and I finally just embraced that that is just not who I am. I cannot do it. I don't function in the morning. The first day that I didn't have to go back to school, it was like so liberating. So honestly, I knew I wanted to leave teaching because teaching was hard. I loved the students actually, and they treated me very well, and so it wasn't political for me in that way. Um, but I had started directing more, like that middle ground between community theater and professional theater that exists in Orlando, and I think I directed almost everywhere.
Well, so
And
I want to pause because for those of you who are listening, some of you might be interested in becoming a theater major, and one of the things I really want to point out is um, the the path that we've already covered. Because you can do a lot of things with a theater degree, and one of them is teaching in high school. And so this idea, Donald, that you got your bachelor's, you focused on acting, even though in that degree you realized that you liked directing more. You finish that degree, you end up at Pottery Barn, you end up teaching at one high school, you move to another high school. And I love this moment that you talk about where you're like, I thought I was going to do this forever. And in fact, you were there for 7 years, which is a really solid amount of time to work on a career, to work on a job. And to be recognized for doing good work. Like that's really cool.
yeah, and I'll never forget one of my principal at the time, who also taught me when I was in high school. When she was leaving, she left the year before I did, or 2 years before I did, or something. She stopped me at like we were doing her going away brunch, and she stopped me and gave me a huge hug, which at the time I didn't realize she was a cuddly person. Now I know she is. But she like grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "Donald Rupe, this is not your forever place." And
Oh,
it really like motivated me because I'm like, you know what, you're right. Like I could very easily do that forever, and many people do, and it's very noble and wonderful. And but I had just realized it wasn't enough for me, and that I've really learned, like you said, because then I went and started a community theater after I left there, I left teaching, and I thought I'd do that forever.
Oh my
And then
goodness. Well,
this
and so what
most,
was the community theater that you started? So you left that, and did you leave for another full-time job?
um, well, I left for full-time hours.
Right,
I
right.
wo- because I was starting a community theater program um for it was for CFC Arts, for Central Florida Community Arts, where I did like a very normal traditional season of shows we got through 5 full seasons, and to pretty great success, where I turned a church fellowship hall, like a 1,300 square foot building, into a little black box. Um, but yeah, when I left, it was not, I did not get paid well. It was honestly frightening how little I got paid and how often, how much I was working, which, a lot of
Well,
people,
yeah, and that's the challenge, right? We leave a full-time job. We listen to what's going on in our, I'm going to say in our soul, right? You listen to what's
yeah,
happening in your soul and you go, okay, so this scenario isn't working for me anymore. What do I do next? And it's really scary to take that leap from a full-time position into, okay, this is going to be part-time, it's going to be a lot of hours, and really a full investment, because CFC Arts is a great organization in the Orlando community. We're going to talk to them at some point during this holiday season, and they do great work, but it's not necessarily the same as teaching high school. So what did you love about working for CFC Arts? What did you love about what you got to create there?
well, I think I really became comfortable in my voice as an artist. Um,
What do you mean by that?
well, I think that I, I I kind of relearned what I thought theater should be during that time. And to be honest, it was by doing theater that I now realize is not the thing that excites me. Um, and I just did so many. I was directing 8 shows a year, and doing like classical, traditional musicals and plays that, again, as a director, I would always be trying to find my own point of view, which of course you're supposed to do as a director,
Hmm.
tell your own story through other people's words. Um, but it was during that time that I realized I think I have more specific things to say, that I can't find in musicals that were written 40 years ago. Um, as much try as I might to find to find my purpose in South Pacific, it's just not, it didn't work for me. Um, and also it's where I developed my philosophy on paying people fairly and treating artists well, and um, because because at the time CFC Arts was not compensating me very well, to be honest, and they know it, and they're doing much better now with their staff is getting paid much more than I was, and it's hard because you're starting something new, you're a young organization. I So I don't fault them too much. Um, but it really developed my sense of what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to focus on, and how I think theater should be run and how artists should be treated. And um, I just really learned my point of view, I think. I grew up.
That's great.
Yeah. And we did some great shows. Like our shows were fantastic. We were a community theater, so we weren't paying people. And that the talent in Central Florida is out of this world.
Oh, yeah.
So really great work during that time.
So can you tell me what it means to be a community theater versus being a professional theater?
Yeah, and when I say that, I strictly mean the actors and the technicians are not getting paid, and for community theater versus in a professional theater. Ideally, everyone should get paid.
Right.
At my theater, they
Right.
do.
Well, and community theater, especially depending on your community, doesn't necessarily indicate the quality of the work.
No,
Because a lot of times you end up with professionals.
that is particularly true here. Um, and that was another thing, that was another motivator for me is I got to know so much of the local talent who would volunteer hours of their lives to do work that inspired them, because so much of their full-time jobs is theme park work, which is fulfilling in different ways, but you don't get to do really, meaty, hard-hitting work at a theme park in the same way. So getting to know that talent pool was another thing that really led me to the next step, and um, trying to create somewhere where everybody gets a sense of artistic fulfillment and a steady paycheck.
I love that. Artistic fulfillment and a steady paycheck.
Both things are necessary.
Oh, they are. Absolutely. Yeah. So you went from high school and you were teaching high school, and then you are working for CFC Arts and you're really building their theater program from the ground up.
Yeah, I founded it. It didn't exist before I went there. That's why I went there, was to start a theater.
Was
Um,
to be able to craft it. So did you go directly from CFC Arts to crafting the Wren?
yeah. Um, and I want to say, because I feel like my my words may have leaned a little negative. CFC Arts took a huge risk on me,
How so?
and allowed me to start. I toured the facility that they still have their offices in, and they brought me into this fellowship. It was a church fellowship hall, which was basically a giant storage unit. And I said, well, if you let me, I could turn this into a theater. Um, and they let me. So if I hadn't gotten that opportunity, I'd probably still be teaching. Um,
So
but yeah,
it was really formative.
oh, absolutely, yeah. And I had autonomy, and I got to do, I was in charge, and that was nice, because that wasn't always true.
Well, and there are some things you're saying that I want to point out. One of the things that we talk about is how do you decide when to take a job, and how do you decide whether the salary is enough, or how do you decide like, oh, I'm going to do this for free, or I'm going to do this for less than the hourly wage that I might really ask for. And one of the things that I know I always look at is, learning versus like we can be paid in things that are different from money. I mean, money is important. Let's not throw that away. But we can be paid in the opportunity to learn. We can be paid in autonomy. We can be paid in a support system. And so it sounds like you maybe made some mental calculations there when you worked with CFC Arts.
Yeah, and in the beginning, to be honest, I don't know. I think I was so ready to do something else that I didn't think about the money very much. Um, and I do have, while I grew up with absolutely no privilege, as an adult, I have a little bit of privilege in that I was able to work for so little. A lot of people wouldn't be able to do that. Um, and I wasn't able to do it for long.
Right.
um, and as the years went on, I started making more money, and that's how I was able to stick around for so long. Um, but yeah, you certainly sacrifice one thing for the other, and I would often think to myself, like, how lucky I felt that I didn't have to do something else to support the thing I wanted to do. Um, but again, that comes from a lot of privilege on my part that not everybody has. Um,
Yeah. Well, and it's something you see like the professional performers who would work with you at CFC Arts, right? Like they're also making that mental calculation.
yeah, and it's an investment. You invest. My greatest investment is in relationships, and um, I feel I hope I feel, even at that time when they were doing stuff for free, and sometimes doing shows that weren't as artistically challenging as what we're doing now. I feel like people knew that they were investing their time into something that would eventually pay off for all of us. Because a lot of the people that I work with now are people I met in those days. Um, and I tried to always, while I never could have dreamed what has happened now, genuinely, I never would have dreamed that the Ren would be what it is or that it would even exist. Or um, I think they knew they would get something out of it along the way.
That's fantastic. And I like how you're talking about how you invested in relationships. One of the things I know that I continue to be amazed by is how small the world is.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
I started out, I left undergrad and I worked for a puppetry company for 7 years. Again,
Yeah.
thought I'd be there forever. And then I wasn't. And so I end up going back to school, and I go back to school for avant-garde theater. And I was like, this will open up my circle. And it did. But it opened it up from a tiny little pinpoint to a slightly bigger thumbtack rather
Yeah.
than like, opening up to all of the things. But it also, again, like what you're saying, it was the choice that I needed to make to feed my soul. And
Yeah.
so that's fun. But I'm constantly surprised by like, wow, this person knows this person, even though person A lives all the way across the country and person B lives like right here in Orlando. And I met them in like Massachusetts and they're in California and I'm here in Orlando. And yet somebody else from a completely different circle knows this person, has worked with them, communicates with them.
Yeah. It's especially like in when you're looking at a specific industry, it's kind of hard to not run into people. Like I remember, in high school, again, I sort of insinuated I grew up very poor. I had never, at the time, I probably, if you had asked me, I probably would have told you I would never get to go to New York City. And the idea of like seeing a Broadway show wasn't even something I aspired to do, much less now. Again, thanks to my newfound privilege, I see so many shows, and I know people in them, which is
Mm-hmm.
like in the beginning when I was first started to realize, oh, I know that person, or like be watching TV, and I'm like, wait, didn't I wasn't I in a play with that guy? And that happens all the time because you're right, it's such a small world. And that has been really inspiring to me too. And I used to talk to my kids when I was a teacher. Um, like, if you think about, okay, how many people are in the world? How many of those people are doing the thing that you want to do realistically? Like, for me, this is what motivated me to try being a writer. I'm like, okay, out of everybody in the world, how many want to be writers? Okay, that many. And then how many of those people who want to be writers actually write something? Okay, not very many probably. And then of the people who actually write something, how many of those things are good? Very few probably. And then of the people who write something good, how many of them have the resources to get it produced?
Hmm.
Very slim. And so that's always been very motivating to me. Like, the world is small. Like there's not that many people walking around who want to be musical theater writers in the scheme of life. And of those people who want to be musical theater writers, half of them never finish a project. And
Right.
so I always
So the
thought
fact that you can finish a project and
that's
you
the
can
biggest
finish
step
another
forward.
project,
Yeah.
that makes a
Anyway,
huge difference.
that's a tangent, but
Yeah, it was a tangent. And the tangent like came from you saying that your greatest investment was in relationships,
yeah.
which I think is huge. And no matter what art form you're going into, or really no matter what industry you're going into, like
Yeah,
relationships help move you forward.
yeah, and I, like people are hate hearing it's not what you know, it's who you know. But there's a positive spin on that. It's it can be who you know because you are a genuinely kind person who likes people. So it doesn't have to be like, scary man in an office upstairs somewhere who's calling all the shots. It's usually, the stage manager that you worked with in college who, this happens to me when I'm applying, I'm sending a script somewhere and I'm like, do I know anybody who works at this theater? And then lo and behold, there's somebody who was in my theater history class. So it's connections and not being afraid to use them and also not being a jerk so that when you do use them, people want to help you.
Right. Yeah, which is maintaining good relationships.
Yeah.
Which I think when I was taught about networking, I always thought that networking was like grab a business card, grab a business card, grab a business card. But it's so much I am learning that it's so much less grab a business card and it's so much more, hey, do we have a good conversation? Hey, did I keep in touch with you?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I used to date a politician and I would go to these networking events and um, he would make fun of me because I would stand off to the side and I maybe talk to two people at a networking event. And I'm like, yeah, but I bet I got farther with those two people than you did with the 100 people whose hand you shook.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I've realized like, being quote unquote a leader of an arts organization, there's a lot of, you learn what that's supposed to look like. And part of that is knowing how to quote unquote work a room and, meet as many people in every space that you're in, you're constantly fundraising. For me, and it helps that I grew up here, but there's seldom a room where anything arts related is happening where I don't know people in a genuinely deep way. Um, and yeah, I lived here for 100 years, so that's part of it. But it's also that, creating deep, meaningful relationships is probably the only important thing in this world anyway.
I love hearing that. So can you tell me more about the Wren? And like so what what have you crafted? What is important to you? Do you have an artist statement? Like what is it?
Well, in the spirit of telling crazy ways that random things happen, the Wren was absolutely an accident. um, my friend and I, he also worked with me at CFC Arts. We had written he's a drummer and a guitar player, and he had helped write some of the shows that I've done, and as well as Jason Bailey is my orchestrates my songs with me. But we wrote a show called From Here, which
Mhm.
is about a lot of things, but it was sort of my response to what it was like living in Orlando when the Pulse shooting happened. And we had written the show, and Chris, my friend Chris Campmeyer, who co-founded the Wren with me, he was like, "Well, maybe we should go make this show a thing, this From Here show." So we had decided we were going to bring From Here to New York, and we were going to kind of relocate, which is wild to think about now. Um, and that was in March 2020. Um, and we were in the middle of running From Here at CFC Arts when the pandemic happened.
Oh boy.
And I had a flight booked the next week to go and scout and meet with like off Broadway theaters and off Broadway theater companies. And the world shut down, of course, as the saying goes. But we had already put in our notice.
Oh,
And we're like, oh, okay. CFC Arts was gracious to let me stay on board as the pandemic went into full swing. But we were like, okay, well, Chris, who is probably the smartest person I know, knew right away that the pandemic was going to be a long thing. And he knew right away that even when we came back from the pandemic, it's probably not the best time to try and bring a new musical to New York City. And as it turns out, it's still not great up there
right.
in terms of getting produced or selling tickets. It's not great anywhere, to be honest. But anyway, he texted me. He found a listing for this building, because he was house hunting and he texted me the listing and he said, "Well, should we do this instead?" And I and he was half joking, and I looked at the link and I'm like, "Well, actually, in terms of buildings in Orlando, there probably are few buildings that are as ready to become theaters as that building because it
Oh,
was,
yes, because it housed the Orlando Ballet, right?
yeah, so it had these giant empty spaces. It had central air conditioning, which a lot of warehouses don't have. It's in a great location. And so I said, well, actually, if we're going to be stuck here, um, maybe we should pursue that. And Chris, kind of I love to tell the story. He kind of like came out to me as a wealthy person. I had no idea during the synthesis of our relationship. Um, and he, uh, 6 months later, he bought this building, and um, we started Renaissance Theater Company. And from there, everything about the Ren has been a surprise. Um, we got into the building on September 7th, and it was a big empty shell.
And this is
And at
September 7th in
2021,
2021. Okay.
yeah, it was a big empty box. And at the time, I fully thought that I was going to build out the spaces to be more traditionally staged. We'd have a proscenium, we'd have a thrust, and but I was like, well, since we have this building that's just totally empty, we might as well use it as it is first and do some sort of immersive thing, kind of inspired by the Sleep No Mores of the world.
Of course.
Um, and I said, and I'm an insane person, so let's open it in 3 weeks.
Oh boy.
So we opened the first iteration of what is Nosferatu, our big vampire immersive theater show. And we put it together in 3 weeks. It took up the whole space. Um, and the next surprise was who came to see Nosferatu.
And who
It
came to
was
see it?
a completely untraditional theater audience.
Really?
Young people and people of color,
That's
um,
amazing.
which is, every theater company's dream, um, to get a demographic that's under the age of 50. Um, and that was all we got. And not only was that our demographic, but they were flocking to the show, and we sold out way more shows than I would have thought for our very first foray. And so we were doing this immersive show, and very adult. And I'd love to tell people, my best friend Landon was like, he came to it and he was like, this show is like way cooler than you are. And I was like, I know, I cannot believe this came out of me. But also, so when we started to think, okay, what were we going to do next? Because we had no idea. Honestly, no, I remember I was going to write like a family holiday musical,
Okay.
uh, a family-friendly holiday musical, because I had always wanted my own version of a holiday show. But we saw this audience, and we're like, well, we have to do things for them. Like, I don't really want to do something for a traditional audience now that we've seen this new audience. And so then we created instead of a traditional family-friendly Christmas musical, I wrote a very adult holiday show, that was also immersive. Um, and again, this audience that doesn't normally go to theaters, just keeps coming. So it kind of snowballed, and that's why we started with immersive theater. It was all accidental. I really was just going to do like a normal season of plays, and I can't get enough of it. And Chris, again, who's a genius, just kind of is always challenging me, like, well, okay, I understand why theater normally works like this, but why does theater work like this? Like, why do you want to do it that way? And I'm like, I don't want to do it that way. So like we and so the Ren has been surprising in every way, in large part because we don't do anything like how I was taught to do anything.
Really? So can you think of like one Like, is there one specific part where you're like, man, I am breaking the rules here?
I mean, there are honestly so many examples where, I mean, it doesn't, like, I'll give you one stupid thing is like, for us, an 8 o'clock show does not sell very well.
Okay.
A 9 o'clock show, that's the ticket for us, or later.
Really? And
Um,
you've tried?
yeah, or matinees. We've tried to have a matinee. Literally nobody will buy a ticket to a matinee at the Ren,
Really?
so we just don't do them. Um, and then so that made me think, okay, well, we can do theater at literally any time we want. Why does everybody have to do a show at 8 o'clock? And then it's like, wait a minute, why does everybody typically do one show a night? Our shows, we could sell two or
Mm-hmm.
even three shows in one night. The actors make more money, and we're concentrating more performances in 2 days a week instead of spreading them out over five. Or like regionally in Orlando, why do most companies only run their shows 3 or 4 weeks? Um, Even when they're very successful, where I've often wondered, like, okay, they sold out every performance. They could probably sell out another 2 months worth if they wanted to. So that's another thing. We just like we function a little bit more like shows in New York City sometimes function, or workshops, where I don't announce our season in advance, because if a show's doing really well, we'll just keep it open. Um, and we start our run, like Nosferatu runs for 2.5 months. Our last show ran for 3.5 months. Um, so another thing, I don't do Tech Week.
Okay.
Like, I just don't. Like,
Why not?
we don't do a Q to Q, because I've always wondered, like, honestly, I've never done Q to Qs as a director, and it pisses people off, actually, because we're just so trained that is the day that the lights are focused. And that is the day where everybody's miserable and the actors have to stand there and everybody's grumpy. Well, I've never worked with a lighting designer who needed the actor to be standing in a spotlight. Um, and I know a lot of people function that way, but we just don't do it, because it's like, why would we do this thing if it makes everybody miserable? I'm not going to do it.
Fair enough.
Um, and I've also wondered, like, why are the techs relegated to 1 week? So my techs are welcome to start much sooner than Tech Week. And also, like, we don't believe in, like, the the pen is up, the process is done on opening night. Our shows keep evolving. I often will add songs or delete songs, or write completely new scenes, restage things. At like, our shows often evolve. Our sets are not always done on opening night, because I'm not gonna kill my whole staff to hit this arbitrary deadline. Like, we don't think about anything the way that I was taught to.
It sounds like you've got a lot more freedom.
Yeah, and a lot of that came from Chris, because he's not a theater person. He came from big tech.
Okay.
Um, and so he really thinks of the Ren as a startup, just like he would think as a tech startup. And that's one big lesson I learned from him. And again, it is huge privilege that we have such a supporter in him. But the idea that theater must be done as cheaply as possible all of the time. And that's something I fight every day, because my instinct is to not spend any money. But I learned from him, and you spend money early on, build the thing, show people what you can do, and then they not only does the audience flock to you because what you're doing is great right away, but also donors flock to you, and supporters and patrons. So we've accumulated this great following so quickly, in part because we've spared kind of few expenses, in terms of, like, if we need a light, we buy it. And that is privilege, and it is thanks to his generous support, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he is a glowing example of what philanthropists are are have the potential to do, and so many of them choose to think so small in how they support organizations, or they support lots of organizations where if they chose one thing, one meaningful place to support, they could really change people's lives. And he's certainly done that.
Well, and it sounds like this collaboration is really helping you reimagine the entire industry of theater, like the business of being in theater.
Yeah, it's like I'm constantly like, why do theaters do that? Like another example is like a lot of theaters and regional theaters and even professional theaters will have one person whose title is director of marketing. And this person is expected to know how to use Photoshop. They're expected to be a photographer, a videographer, a video editor. They're supposed to have press contacts. They're supposed to know how to do a website. It's insane to me, because many theaters, I'm sure if they could afford it, they would then hire people underneath the director of marketing, and some people, a lot of places do, but smaller regional theater companies, you often have just one marketing person who does everything. Like for us, we decided early on, let's not do it that way. Let's, instead of having one full-time person who wants to pull their hair out all the time, let's segment the marketing department into 7 people who each have their own department that they focus on. So that's another small example of, and we kind of just don't do anything like normal, quote unquote, normal theater companies.
Do you think it is structured more like a tech company, or do you think you've kind of found your own structure?
Yeah, we just kind of do the thing that feels right, and the thing that we hope is best for the people involved.
That's
Like
great.
we don't do meetings. Like
Okay.
we'll do one production meeting every month, but we've found it. I've always found meetings tedious, but I don't take meetings. That sounds so stupid. Like a lot of executive directors or people who run theater companies I know fill their days with meetings with all these people, just trying to fundraise. If it can be done in an email, I'm gonna do it in an email. And I found people respond quite well to that.
That's
Because
great.
a lot of people will reach out like, hey, are you available to meet on this day? And my follow-up is, well, tell me more about what you need. Do we need to meet on this day? And they're usually like, oh, actually, I guess not. What I need is this. And I'm like, okay, you got it. See
Done.
you. See you when I see you.
That's
Um,
great. So what, because we're moving towards the end. So what would you recommend for a student who wants to become an arts organization leader?
what do I recommend in terms of like education, or just like generally?
I mean, education is part of it because it sounds like your education, even though you are choosing not to do the things the way theater is done,
Yeah.
like your experience doing theater the traditional way has informed the choices you're making now, right?
Yeah.
So what would you, if you were a college student right now and you wanted to get to where you are, what suggestions would you give to that younger self?
Well, my first piece of advice is always don't be a jerk.
Mm,
Um, Way too many people in this business are jerks. It's just true.
I agree.
Um, and so I always would tell my students like you have to be nice. If you want to make it at all in this world, you must be nice, and genuinely so. Um, Help people when you can, do the best you can for people around you, and that will get you further than anything else, probably. The second thing is to, it, I feel like people need to be honest about their talent, and in terms of where their talents actually lie. Um, I I try to tell people like yes, education can bring you a long way, but the truth is that talent is a tangible thing that people either have or they don't have. And a lot of people are doing things that they don't have the talent for. And I don't necessarily mean in terms of artistically. And I mean, like for a long time I thought like I really wanted to be a leader, quote unquote, what I thought a leader looks like. So I thought I would give speeches and I thought I would go to these meetings that now I refuse to go to. I thought I would enjoy being the boss. The reality is I hate being the boss. I do not have a talent for giving speeches. That's not where my talents lie. And it took me a long time to realize I don't want that.
Well, and it's a
Um,
discovery process, right?
yeah. Yeah. And so like realizing what my real talent is has really made everything a lot easier. And so
And
I try to tell
what is your real talent as you see it?
I think that I am really well, I hate like sounding bragging about myself, but I think I'm really good at sharing, um, like inspiring people to own their what they're working on and inspiring people to feel a part of something that is theirs and not just they're not just a cog in a machine. They're not just an actor on a stage. They're a collaborator. I feel like I'm good at making people feel not only feel like they are part of something that they own, but give sharing ownership. I don't know. That's
Well,
not
and
the
having spoken to artists who have worked on projects at the Ren, I can say that I sense that.
yeah, and it's intentional and it's also like I guess team building would be the easier way to say all of that, but it's jarring for some people when they come and work for us in the beginning that they have actual ownership of what they're doing.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not one of my weaknesses is like I'm not walking around saying good job, like congratulations, you're doing a great. I'm not an affirmer, and the reason I'm not is because I I don't need that. Like I don't need positive affirmation because I'm doing it for myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
I want to do a good job because I want to do a good job. I don't need somebody's approval,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I inspire people to be their own approval in a way when they're working on a show. I don't know if that makes entire sense, but that's
No,
kind of my superpower, I
it
think.
totally makes sense. So you'd recommend that people start to acknowledge what their own talents are, or give
Yeah,
themselves space to come to that realization.
yeah. Not everybody's going to be a star on Broadway,
No?
and a lot of people walk around thinking that they are, and I'm like, but why? Like you think like at one time I thought there was a short period of time where I thought I would be an actor, and the truth is that I didn't even like acting.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had just convinced myself that that's what I thought I wanted to do. So like finding really what you want to do. Um, be nice and be honest about what you want to do and what you should be doing.
Well, and what I love about this is so you start out thinking you're going to be an actor, you graduate, you end up teaching high school theater, doing book plays. You find that that's not totally feeding your soul. You end up with CFC Arts actually building a community theater from the ground. And community theaters are so very much based on relationships, which is something that you really talk about valuing. And then that turns into writing your own work, which turns into an accidental development of the Ren Theater, which is now your full time job. Yes.
Yes, more than my full-time job, my life.
Yeah, and that's really amazing. So going from a theater degree, like a bachelor's in acting,
It was just general theater,
so a
theater study.
bachelor's and a general theater degree, and uh, that's a really great journey from that start.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, because I've taken so many twists and turns, I don't, I have no idea what'll be next, but I doubt that I'm in my forever place just yet. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll retire and do something else. What's interesting is like we don't even call what we do theater all of the time
Hmm.
because while it certainly shares all of the elements of what the definition of theater is, it doesn't feel like theater all of the time. Like it's crossing over in this between somewhere between theme park, immersive work, just performance art, dance, and it's kind of it really is its own genre that I'm sure exists elsewhere. I just haven't seen it. That is where it also crosses over into this nightlife, like adult nightlife world that I don't see a lot of theater happening. Um,
No, and I think that we're in Orlando, and Orlando, we're trained a little bit differently than the rest of the country because we make assumptions based on what we see in the theme parks.
yeah, and I will say I've learned a lot from theme parks.
Hmm.
Uh, and I feel a lot of pressure because the people in Orlando are used to the artistry at theme parks. So if you want somebody to, somebody's jaw to drop at your set design, you're competing with Disney World.
Right.
And we think a lot about that at the Ren because so much of what we do is immersive. So we really try to think about, okay, if we want to impress people, we've got to really work for it.
Right.
Um, and that's the other, I think the reason people gravitate towards us is because they don't know what they're going to see.
Mm-mm.
Um, they don't know what the show is about. So even if they end up not liking the show, inevitably they're like, well, that is not what I thought that was going to be.
But it was beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Or like that wasn't exactly for me, but this set is amazing. Like they get something something from it.
This is awesome. And we are out of time. So I have 10 questions, but we're not going to get through them all. So we're going to go as quickly as we can and we'll see what we come up with. So,
I'll be
question one, creativity is.
problem solving.
I love it. Problem solving. So, what motivates you the most?
Um, being the best at what I'm doing.
I love it being the best. And in
I'm
one
making
to
a horrified
three,
face.
say that again.
I'm making a horrified face that I just said that. Okay, go ahead.
In 1 to 3 sentences, describe your favorite creative project.
My answer to that is always whatever I'm currently working on.
I love that. What is the best or worst advice you ever received regarding your creative field?
You know, you're not very good at this, right?
Oh my God, that's
From my
terrible.
supposed best friend, yeah.
What? No. And you kept doing it.
Spite. I'm motivated by spite.
What is one warning sign you watch for when considering taking on a project?
The people involved, the other people involved.
How do you know, like, what sends off your, like, warning bells, spidey sense?
I have zero patience for anybody who seems like they might be a jerk.
Ooh, me too. I like that. How do you stay current in your practice?
See as much as I can and do as much as I can.
I love that. So you're creatively blocked, but the deadline is real. How do you get unstuck?
The deadline is the only reason I ever finish anything.
The deadline is your creative unblocker.
Absolutely. And I always remember that just because I'm finished doesn't mean it's finished.
Ooh, yeah. In one sentence, what does being an artist mean to you?
It's the only thing I know how to do and the only thing I want to do
Do you consider yourself an artist?
in every way.
Awesome. And what is one artist, past or present, whose work brings you great joy?
Oh Lord. I'm trying not to say my most cliche answer, but I've always loved watching Bernadette Peters perform.
I love her. She's amazing. And what is one thing that you are deeply grateful for right now?
Um, Renaissance Theater Company.
Ah, that's great. Donald Roop, it was so nice to have you on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope that I sort of answered the way I should have.
I, there's no right answer. We're in a creative field and we all have squiggly careers. And as long as we're being sincere, I think that's the right answer.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And the audience out there, thank you for listening to Embracing the Bold. That is the program that represents the Valencia College artists and students and projects that are happening right now. And also, we're celebrating the Orlando community. And I hope you are having a fantastic holiday season. And we will see you next time.